Here's a question. Do you remember a game called Anthem? It was supposed to compete with Destiny. It was supposed to reinvent the live service genre. It was supposed to be BioWare's next big universe. Something they could build on for the next decade. Instead, it became one of gaming's biggest cautionary tale. Today, we're going to take a look at Anthem's rise, its messy development, its disastrous launch, and the abandoned reboot that almost saved it. And trust me, once you see how Anthem was made, you'll understand why the game never stood a chance. Anthem, developed by BioWare and published by EA, launched on February 22nd, 2019. As an ambitious online multiplayer action role-playing game featuring customizable exosuits called Javelins in a shared open world, marketed to reinvent the live service genre with innovative flight mechanics and cooperative gameplay. The title promised a persistent world blending BioWare's narrative strengths with looter-shooter elements akin to Destiny. Its failure stemmed from pre-production issues, spanning several years with only 15 to 18 months of full production, exacerbated by leadership indecisions, Frostbite engine limitations, and mismatched expectations. But before that, let's take a look back at the reveal of Anthem.
It's awesome to be making games for BioWare fans. You know, we have the best fans, so it's been super satisfying to come back to it. And, you know, I just want to be able to continue the legacy of the studio. And that's kind of where it started with Anthem, is just thinking about, you know, what is the evolution of a BioWare game? And we wanted to create a brand new world for people to discover, you know, a whole new world of story and character. But we also wanted to do something that was, you know, more of a dynamic and living world, a game that would change every time you came back and played it. We also wanted to do something where, you know, if you wanted to invite your friends into it, then you could do that as well. So that was really the initial vision of the game, not an MMO, not a multiplayer game with story sort of bolted on this side, but something new and different, and I think the team has really captured that vision over the years.
At E3 2017, Anthem was revealed as BioWare's ambitious pivot to live service gaming. The pre-alpha demo highlighted Fort Tarsis as a social hub with first-person NPC interactions that rival BioWare's RPG pedigree, transitioning seamlessly to Javelin development for exploration. Promises included a dynamic world with random events altering environments from summer to winter, survival-focused expeditions emphasizing teamwork over loot grinding, and 4-player co-op plunging into the cataclysmic sharper storms. Flight was demoed as fluid Iron Man-style traversal across landscapes. They compared it directly to Destiny for longevity, projecting 7 to 10 year cycles with ongoing content. 2017 me was so naive and believed all of this stuff. It was so promising with being able to have Destiny and Anthem coming up as a competitor to push each other in the live service looter shooter genre. However, when you take a look at the development process of Anthem, you realize things aren't as simple. Anthem, codenamed Dylan, entered pre-production in 2012, but remained in prototyping limbo until mid-2017, with core production spanning only 15 to 18 months due to the Frostbite engine adaptations. Early visions of Anthem were a survival looter shooter with PvP mechanics, kinda like Arc Raiders, which is popular now. So low-key they were cooking. However, these ideas were curtailed by engine limitations on procedural events and RPG persistence, leading to a shift of flight combat as their main appeal. Initially, Anthem was supposed to be more mission narrative focused, but it then pivoted to Destiny-like looter shooter due to EA's live service push. However, that idea faced resistance at first. Overall, Anthem was faced with a lot of internal challenges, from shifts of ideas, talented developers moving to different projects, and 18 months of actual development to release a game that was promising a lot on an engine they weren't comfortable with. So yeah, failure was the only option. Finally, we have the launch in February 2019. And let's just say it revealed stark differences from what was shown at E3 2017. The vibrant Fort Tarsis with bustling NPCs became a lifeless loading hub requiring frequent transitions, contradicting seamless world claims. Dynamic events were absent at launch, replaced by repetitive strongholds and free play lacking variety. Flight remained the highlight, but was hampered by invisible barriers, far from unrestricted freedom that was advertised. The story lasted for about 10 to 15 hours, which I guess isn't that bad compared to Destiny's story, which was added on with DLCs. Sadly, the campaign had binary choices, lacking the impact we expect from a BioWare game, and the social hubs were isolated from action. Multiplayer was drop-in, but plagued by bugs, disconnects, and poor matchmaking. I guess a positive would be that Anthem's environments are among its strongest assets. However, this beauty masked profound emptiness. Players report sluggish ground movement in hubs like Fort Tarsis, with walking speeds frustrating exploration of crowded areas, which is a nitpick. Free-play mode offered world events like relic hunts or enemy clears, but these became repetitive. Hold points, collect echoes, or defend sites, yielding predictable rewards. Strongholds, Anthem's raid-like endgame activities exemplify repetition, featuring 3 instances: Tyrant Mine, Temple of Scar, Heart of Rage, with formulaic progression, clear mobs, solve puzzles, boss fight. Missions recycle assets. Story quests devolved into stand on point, fetch an item loops, with contracts mirroring the structure across 15 to 20 hour campaign. BioWare's February 2019 roadmap detailed Act 1, launching in March with free play events, legendary missions, and a mastery system, accumulating in a Cataclysm drop in May. Act 2 and 3 were teased for later expansions, but Act 1 features were delayed repeatedly. Cataclysm, originally scheduled for May, arrived in August after public testing. By September, BioWare abandoned Acts entirely, citing core issues requiring thorough review, shifting to vague seasonal updates. This pivot acknowledged that quick fixes were inefficient, prioritizing systems rework over content, but delivered minimal changes. Unfortunately, it seemed that the developers that were working on Anthem after the launch decided to rework the whole game. And since it's EA they're working for, I imagine that did not go well with the executives, because if your game isn't making profit, what exactly are you doing with it? Just throw it in the garbage. But that's just me assuming that's what happens there. Eventually, BioWare's communication shifted from pre-launch hype to sparse blogs post-September 2019. Overall, Anthem's development spanned nearly 7 years, but entered full production only 15 to 18 months before launch, shifting to significant crunch with reports of 90-hour work weeks. Initial concepts envisioned a shared world shooter with dynamic events, but leadership indecisions prolonged pre-production, delaying core features like fight mechanics until late stages. BioWare's magic, story-driven RPG expertise clashed with live service demands, exacerbated by EA's Frostbite engine challenges. Post-launch seasonal roadmaps were scrapped for fixes, with only Cataclysm releasing in August 2019 before shifting to overhaul plans. But wait, there's more. BioWare announced Anthem Next in February 2020 as a fundamental restructure, addressing loot, missions, and progression, halting seasonal updates for long-term redesign. Early concepts included increased loot frequency, Javelin overhauls featured skill trees per specialization, artifacts replacing components, and on-the-fly ability swaps, with 11 equipment slots emphasizing synergies. UI prototypes showed streamlined loadouts, accessible anywhere, melee experiments, and responsive gunplay. These features gave fans hope, with social media previews eliciting positive feedback despite no firm timeline. EA executives reviewed Anthem Next progress in early February 2021, deciding against expansion and halting development later that month. BioWare cited that COVID-19's remote work reduced productivity, and that they were shifting focus to Dragon Age and Mass Effect amid team stress. A 30-person team had prototyped changes, but leadership shifts sealed its fate. Live service for Anthem continued without major updates, marking official abandonment of overhaul. Post-cancellation, Anthem maintained minimal support, with store restorations and event revisits until EA announced server sunset on January 12, 2026. Okay, so I managed to somehow get my hands on Anthem, and I played a few hours of it. I'll say this. The movement in this game is top tier. Flying is still so much fun. Like, I am so disappointed there aren't many games that has flying capabilities. But that leads into my next statement as to why there aren't many games with flying capabilities. I don't think anyone has figured out how to implement flying combat or flying gameplay or build a game around flying. It's because no one has figured out how to approach it. So, whilst I was playing Anthem, I realized something very important. Flying movement is really cool, but the game around me, or the world around me, feels like a world that requires boots. The only time flying feels essential and it feels like meaningful is when you're in the open world and exploring. But there are a lot of missions and dungeons, and these dungeons are very closed off, and you just don't get the full appeal of flying in those dungeons. And that's unfortunate because I think the flying is really fun, but it feels very gimmicky, especially when you're in dungeons. But overall, I was surprised that the game is still alive. Obviously, in a few months it's going to be shut down, servers are going to be closed, and that's the last we'll ever get of actual Anthem gameplay. But the core or the foundation of Anthem is really good. It's just unfortunate they weren't able to build out into something very special. But who knows, maybe someone will be inspired by Anthem and push the boundaries of gaming, because the flying mechanics were really close to pushing the boundaries of gaming to our next stratosphere, but we're stuck on building worlds and games on grounds. It's really unfortunate that Anthem didn't pan out to be something very successful. Unfortunately, BioWare's Anthem suffered from repeated director's change with no cohesive identity until mid-2017 at the E3 demo. Hastily built to impress EA executives despite lacking playable missions. So, all in all, Anthem didn't just fail because of bugs or content droughts. It failed because its development was built on confusion, shifting goals, and overly ambitious promises. It was a game with incredible potential, flight mechanics that is still a unique gameplay experience to this day, buried under several years of indecision and only 18 months of real work. Anthem could have been great. It could have been the game Destiny finally had to compete with. It could have been BioWare's next legendary franchise. Instead, it became a cautionary tale for live service games. I think if they spent time on Anthem and fully focused on making it better like No Man's Sky or even Warframe, it would have been something great. But being an EA game really doesn't allow developers to commit years of running at a loss with the hope of profits. They needed to be massively profitable from the beginning for EA to actually give them enough resources to make things better. But what do I know? Do you think Anthem deserved a second chance? Let me know in the comments down below, and be sure to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.